to our Choosing a Financial Professional webinar. We've got some interesting concepts to discuss, and we're going to just jump into that. Just in case you didn't hear me the first time, we will ask everybody to stay muted until the end, but we will be taking questions and sharing resources in the chat box. So you do want to find that chat box if you haven't already. So the chat box, I usually can find it by hovering on the bottom of the screen, and then I can see it kind of pop up and I can open the chat. You should see some messages in there already, and everybody should be able to hear me. If you can't hear me, then write in the chat and we'll try to get you some help. And maybe I could have somebody in the chat say, can they hear me? Thank you, Seisha. Anybody else can hear me out there? Great. Okay. Anyway, so looks like we're getting good connection with everybody. Wonderful. You should also be able to see a slide that says Choosing a Financial Professional on the screen. So hopefully you see that too. All right. All right. Let's go ahead with introductions. Next slide, please. So as I said, I'm Kathy Sweedler. I'm a consumer economics educator with University of Illinois Extension. I teach in East Central area and have a financial wellness for college students program here at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Seisha, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. So my name is Seisha Grabenstetter. I am a consumer economics educator housed in Grundy, Kankakee, and Will County. So I'm a little bit south of Chicago.
So we're always really curious, next slide please, we're always really curious where everybody is from that is logging in. So again, let's try out that chat box and make sure everybody's located it and can use it. And please put in the chat what state and or county you're logging in from today. If you haven't already found the chat box, it is at usually I find it at the bottom of my screen. By just hovering over that area, it should pop up. It could be at the top of your screen. I've heard of that too. Looks like we're getting people finding it, and we've got people from, wow, Cook County, Will County, Austin, Texas, fantastic. Hopefully you guys are getting good weather now, not some of the weather I saw you having. And again, at this point in time, everybody should be able to hear us and see the slides. So if you can't, go ahead and write that in the chat. We've got some people standing by to help too. Okay, so welcome as people I see are still joining us. We're going to be kicking off, starting on the content here for our Choosing a Financial Professional webinar. And I do want to kind of also let you know that these slides will be available online later. So if you have anything you want to go back and look at later, we're recording this. It will get archived. You'll get an email about how to link up to that in the future. So let's go to the next slide and see what are we trying to do with this webinar today. And take a look at our learning objectives. Next slide. There we go. So we're going to start out by talking about what is like some of the terminology around choosing a financial professional that people use, and what do we even mean by financial professional, and take a look at all the, well, not all the types, but several of the different types of financial professionals that are out there. Then we're going to move into thinking about what kind of questions do we need to ask people to make sure that we're a good match with the person that we're going to be working with, and understanding what the fiduciary versus non-fiduciary responsibilities of somebody is. And then we also want to share a lot of tools and resources with you today that can help you as we move forward. So let's begin today by exploring, like, who does provide financial services, and what do we mean when we say financial services? So moving on to our next slide even. Again, another chat opportunity. What do you think are the top reasons a person might seek help from a financial professional? And think kind of broadly here. Could be all kinds of people that are financial professionals. Why do you think people ask for help? Seisha has life transitions. Anybody else want to add something to our chat box? somebody that wants to be able to take control over their financial lives and feels like working with somebody could helpful. Investment help, preparing for the future like retirement, that's a biggie too. All right, mortgage, kids going to college. You know, and this is an excellent, you guys are doing a great job here of listing things, because a big piece of this really is helping us with our different goals. And depending on who we are and where we are in our life stages, we have different goals. All right, so the next slide kind of summarizes all this for us, but I think you've covered a lot of it. And that is help during times of transition. So as people said, like maybe somebody is ready to retire and they want to get some extra help for that. Or they are looking at other kinds of transitions like changing jobs or moving to a new state. A lot of times I think people ask for help because they feel like they need a level of expertise that they don't have. So they're looking for specific expertise or specific help. So for example, somebody mentioned investment advice, and that is a good example of that's specific expertise. And in general, that just reaching towards our different financial goals. If we take a look at the next slide, then we can see that it's very common for people to look to gather information from really a whole variety of places. So here people were just asked, where do they go for information about retirement planning? And as you can see, this people could check more than one, but there's a whole bunch of places that people go, and such as, you know, getting help from a professional financial advisor, getting help from somebody who's got that expertise at work, asking family and friends. So a whole variety of places, and I think that is great because that says that we've got a lot of resources out there, and it never hurts to check more than one source. And as we're going through the different slides, you'll notice that we're going to be putting up links to different things in the group chat so that you can get that information in more detail if you want as we go through. Okay, so next slide. So when we start talking about all the different types of financial professionals, we really want to kind of clarify what we mean by that. So people use this word financial professionals in different ways. So let's look at what we're talking about, which is relatively broad for this webinar. And on the next slide, we really talk about what can a financial planner do for you. So a financial planner is one type of a financial professional. And typically, in different people use the word financial planner even differently. Oops, go back one more, please. But a financial planner typically is somebody who will take a more holistic approach, in the sense that they're going to look at your finances in a comprehensive manner, considering lots of different areas. So like in contrast from a tax accountant who might just look at your tax situation, a financial planner would consider your tax situation in relation to your retirement needs, your estate planning, your investing, and all of those things. So it's typically is a more comprehensive approach. Interesting enough though, many people who call themselves financial planners really don't expect to be helping people with budgeting or credit management. They kind of figure that you're going to get that help somewhere else, or you already have it taken care of. All right, so moving on to the next slide, it is kind of complicated and confusing when you start looking at these different titles to sometimes know what they mean. And so it's always worth, when you start talking to somebody, to do a quick Google and find out what kind of accreditations do they have. What does it really mean when somebody calls themselves a CPA or an accredited financial counselor? Both of those are titles that require certain certifications, certain education levels. Interesting enough, a financial planner really doesn't tell you very much. There is no legal definition or any requirements that says you have to have XYZ education or XY, you know, you've passed some exam or experience to call yourself a financial planner. Anybody can call themselves a financial planner. So that's another kind of useful thing to keep in mind when you're out there exploring financial professionals. I do want to say though that and the next slide shows some of this, that for today's webinar, we're talking about all types of financial professionals. So not just people who might be doing a comprehensive look at your financial life, or somebody who's just looking at your investment, but also all the different kinds of people that you might work with at different stages of your life to have help with your finances. And this would include things like credit counselors, financial coaches, lawyers, real estate agents, financial service agents at banks and credit unions. Really, the list goes on and on. And that's because so much of what we're going to be talking about today really does apply to all these different areas in finding out information. So again, it's always good to find good sources for this. So sometimes finding credit counselors is a little tricky, so we did put in the chat box a link to the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, which is a good place to go if you're looking for a credit counseling services. Okay, so let's now move on to talking about some of the terminology that is important to understand no matter what type of financial professional that you're working with. And the first term that we want to talk about is a fiduciary. So a fiduciary is someone who must legally put your interests first, even before their own. So for example, a fiduciary financial professional must recommend products that are best for you. And they have to tell you about their qualifications, how they're paid, any conflicts of interest, all that good information that you as a consumer have a right to know. And the reason this is important is there are some people who are in financial services who have a fiduciary role with you, and there are other people who can provide good services to you, but they do not have a fiduciary role. Doesn't mean that necessarily one is better for you than the other, but it's important that you know what their role is, and you can always ask. So here we talked about they have to recommend products that are best for you. Somebody who does not have a fiduciary relationship but is giving you investment advice has to at least give you recommendations that are suitable for you. But there's a fine difference there between best and suitable. In suitable, somebody can think about how they're paid as well as what would meet your needs. So let's give another example of this so we can kind of understand it from a different perspective. Next slide. When I go to somebody like my doctor or a lawyer, I assume they have a fiduciary relationship with me, which they do, and that they would tell me the best options for me if I'm considering different problems and different choices. But in other situations where I'm having a financial relationship with somebody, I really don't expect them to have a fiduciary relationship. So for example, when I go to buy a car, I don't think that the car salesperson has a fiduciary relationship with me. They don't. I know that while I expect them to give me recommendations on a car that's suitable because they want me to buy a car that I'm going to like, so I'll come back another time and buy more cars from them. If I get kind of hooked into the idea of like leather seats or a convertible or some other extra add-on, I don't expect that a car salesperson is going to say, now, at the beginning you told me you wanted to spend this much, and now you're talking about adding these things on. That's not their role, and I don't expect it to happen. So because they don't have a fiduciary relationship with me. Another example of that on the next slide is real estate agents. Again, a real estate agent wants you to buy a house because then they're going to get their commission and they're going to get something out of there. So they're going to try to show you houses that are suitable for you, that you're going to like. But they don't have a fiduciary relationship. So they don't have to show me my best options necessarily when you take my overall financial life into consideration. So this isn't like they're bad people, doesn't mean that. It just means that I need to know whether somebody has a fiduciary relationship or not with me when I'm entering into financial relationship with them so that I can act accordingly. I have to be the one that reminds myself of how much I want to pay for something like a house when I'm working with a real estate agent. All right, so now let me switch this over to Seisha, and she's going to talk about this a little more and move into some other concepts.
Thank you, Kathy. So we just kind of wanted to reiterate that, there are professionals out there that are fiduciaries who don't sell investments. And so these people have your best interests at heart with their clients. So things like a physician, a lawyer, a certified public accountant, a trust officer, a CFP practitioner. So those are certified financial advisors who are able to give out advice in a bigger way. And then we have a registered investment advisor and the NAPA, registered financial advisor. So these are all what we consider fiduciaries. So these are just professionals who, again, they're looking out for your interests instead of their own. Next slide, please. So one thing is we wanted to also show you some individuals who might not be fiduciaries. So people like a stockbroker, an insurance agent, so that could be for your home, your auto, for your car, or even life insurance. Those typically are not fiduciaries. They're looking to help you pick out the best products for your needs, but they're not looking out for your best interests all the time. And then, of course, registered representatives, they're not fiduciaries. So people who call themselves financial planners may or may not have a fiduciary relationship with you. There's no real legal definition of a financial planner, and anyone can call themselves a financial planner. But if they have, if they're a certified financial planner with that CFP logo behind them, they are for sure a fiduciary. So like we saw on the first slide, those certified financial planners, those NAPA associates who are involved with those organizations, they have to be a fiduciary. And the rules about who must act as a fiduciary are always changing. So you definitely want to stay up to date for updates, especially because we threw a great resource in the chat. Next slide, please. So we also wanted to give you some examples of investment professionals as defined by law. So for financial professionals who buy or sell securities or provide advice about investments, the law does define the two titles. So there's an investment advisor and there are brokers. And so investment advisors give advice about securities such as stocks and bonds, mutual funds, and annuities, and they may manage clients' investments, including buying and selling securities. So that's something that you should be aware of. Brokers really typically focus more on buying and selling securities for their customers. Sometimes brokers use other titles such as financial consultant, financial advisor, and investment consultant. So a financial, again, may be an investment advisor or a broker or neither. So if you're looking to see if the person that you're working with is a broker or an investment advisor, we definitely have this tool called the FINRA Broker Check. You can check the background of an investment professional. Definitely want to check that out before doing any kind of business with any professional. Next slide, please. So we also wanted to show like who was a fiduciary and who wasn't. So you can see here on the slide that the investment advisors are fiduciaries, that they are looking out for your best interests. They're giving recommendations that are the best for you. So the brokers may not be making the best investment decisions for you. They're looking for more suitable investments, and they may be looking at commissions or bonuses that they receive when they're looking to sell you some products. So this is just something to be aware of when you're looking at people and you're talking to them, and always asking questions. So that kind of leads us into our next slide. When we're talking about interviewing financial professionals, which is very important to do, the one question you should want, if this is the only question that you ask, is will you work in a fiduciary relationship with me? If that's something that's important to you, and hopefully it is, we want you to ask this question and make sure that they are looking out for your best interests. So as we move forward, we definitely want to know, we kind of learned a little bit about fiduciaries and what the differences are, but now we want to talk about how does financial professionals get paid? And this is important. Just, like we know how doctors and lawyers get paid, we want to know how our financial professionals that we're working with get paid. So next slide, please. So there are 3 different types of ways that financial professionals are paid. So there's the flat fee, the commission, and a combination of both. So let's talk a little bit about each. Many financial planners are paid at a flat fee for their service. This flat fee may be determined by the size of their financial plan. So how big or how small your financial plan is. They may be paid by the hour, or they're paid by a percentage of the assets you give them to manage. And sometimes it's called assets under management, and that's how usually they talk about it, as a flat fee. And so then as we look forward to commission, financial professionals who are paid by commission receive income based upon what you buy. And so that, they also might be paid by bonuses or giving you other things. So just something to be aware of, whether, you're buying a life insurance policy or looking at an annuity or looking at, things for the future. Those are two of the ways that they get paid, but there also is a combination. So some financial planners may charge a fee and receive commissions, and these terms are called fee-based or fee plus commission, and fee offset kind of describe the payment method. So if you hear those terms, you will be more aware with them. With a fee offset method, some of your fees may be reduced if the financial professional receives commission while making purchases for you. In contrast, the term fee only, again, means that you only pay the fee the way the financial professional is paid. They don't receive any commissions or prizes or bonuses on what they sell, and therefore there's no financial incentive to recommend one investment over another. Again, they're looking at what's for your best interest, especially with that fee only. And if we go to the next slide, we have a couple questions. When choosing a financial professional, how would you prefer that they be paid? Would you like a flat fee, a commission, or a combination? And I'll wait for some answers in the chat box. Flat fee. Flat fee. Okay. Anyone else? And these are kind of common terms that we kind of know about. That when we discuss it, when you're working with a lawyer, typically there might be a flat fee of how much they charge by the hour or something like that. Kathy says, I want to know how they're paid and then I can decide given the situation. That's a great point. We might not know, maybe we really like working with that person. Maybe we really enjoy being around them. And, that could also, having that professional relationship can change the way you maybe think about having them be paid. So, we want to definitely talk, so as we move forward, we definitely want to take note of questions to ask when we're choosing a financial professional. Next slide. And I just kind of love this slide, the way it looks. It's got a puppy dog on it, and he's looking to take questions. He's like, hi, what questions do I have? So let's go to the next slide and talk about some questions you should be asking yourself. So when you're choosing a financial professional, there are several things you want to consider. Qualifications are important to consider, including the person's experience and education. Hopefully that you can always ask them, where did you go to school? How long have you been a financial advisor, financial coach, whatever it is. And that person you choose should have experience handling financial situations that are similar to yours. We talked about the many different types of credentials that exist out there, and some are good indications of a person's training and skill, and others may indicate more limited knowledge. So knowing what the difference is between the types of designations is meaningful for you. So we definitely want to make sure that we know what that person has to go through to become a certified financial planner, an accredited financial counselor, a certified public accountant. We want to know, how long did you have to do that for? How many hours did you train for? How much education did you have? So that's something to be aware of. Most people who give advice about investments need to be registered as an investment advisor. So that's something that we talked about a little bit earlier with that, knowing that term and that definition. A person's individual training and education is important as well, but it's also important to know that they keep up with new changes. So definitely ask about continuing education as well as their experience with keeping up with the times, right? And then we also want to talk about how much can you afford? That's a question to ask yourself and see what's going on there. How much can we afford when we're talking about with this financial professional? Are their services too high for you right now? But we also want to ask, how much will you interact with this person and have that, and then how do you respect them? I think that's another important piece of this. You may not personally like them. They may be kind of gruff, or they might be not not necessarily silly, but maybe they're just very energetic. But we definitely want to respect this person and know that they know what they're doing. Even though you may not like them, they're hopefully going to be able to help you with your challenges and needs. Next slide, please. So we definitely want you to interview candidates. We usually say at least 3 candidates that you want to talk to and have a discussion with. We have a really great resource from the University of Illinois Extension's website called Choosing a Financial Professional. Brooke dropped that link in the slides or in the chat box, so definitely check that out. But then you can definitely have an interview with this person. So, look at, their personality, how much is the cost, like what things can you afford, what kind of services are you looking for? And then, of course, we definitely want to compare and contrast, the differences between each professional. And we do really ask that you go to 3 because there can be significant differences between financial professionals out there. Whether it's a financial coach or someone who's looking to help you with credit management, like you want to look for the right person for you. So comparing, what services do they offer and how can they help you, as well as how are those people paid. So if we go to the next slide, if we're looking at what else do you need to know, we talked a lot about fiduciary versus non-fiduciary a lot earlier in this. That's something you have to decide for yourself if it's important to you. If you want them to look out for your best interests, or if they are just looking out for suitability, making sure that something works for you instead of like making sure it's the best. We also talked about how much are they getting paid. So we talked about those 3 different types. And then, the experience and credentials is very, very important. We kind of talked about that on a couple slides ago, but looking at, how do they keep up with the industry? How often do they have to go to professional development conferences? Like, how do they learn about new things that are going on? And then what other services are offered? Maybe it's just a financial plan. Maybe we're looking at more at a holistic financial planning where we include things like estate planning, retirement, investments. That's more broader. So we need to look at what's being offered. Do they give you a written plan? Do they actually give you a piece of paper with some information on it, or how do they help you get to your goals? And then, of course, what process does a financial professional use to identify clients' goals? Do they just have a conversation with you? Is it more pen and paper? Is it a little bit of both? You have to decide what's best for you. And then, of course, the most important question you need to know is how will the financial plan be tailored to your personal needs? Because we all have different things, right? Like some of us in Extension have children, some don't. Some are in later life, some are in younger life. We just make sure that it's being, you're not getting a cookie cutter kind of financial plan. So something to be aware of. So if we're looking at this is kind of a balancing act when we talk about, choosing a financial professional, because there's many, many different factors, and we all want to, we can't do everything given our resources, such as time and money that we have. So for example, some financial professionals charge quite a bit for services at some stages of our life that we might not be able to afford. So things like, looking at, do we want them to be a fiduciary or not? Can we actually afford the services that they're giving us? How much expertise do they have? How long have they been a financial professional? Do they have a personal touch? Do they reach out to you on your birthday or send you anniversary cards, or reach out to you on a more regular basis? I know that some financial planners do that and others don't. I think it's just it's a personality thing. How convenient is it for you to get a hold of them? That's important too. And then the time, like investing the time in this person and making sure that we make the time to do the things that need to be done. So sometimes I call it homework or working with a financial professional, but sometimes you need to do things too, like things like maybe you need to do a will or look at different types of insurance that you need to look at that you want to purchase. So things that you might need to be doing as well. Of course, we may want to choose a financial professional that lives, maybe within 15 minutes of us, but that person who lives 15 minutes away isn't the best fit for us. So it's something that we want to be more aware of as well. Each person has to decide which variables are most important to them and how much is worth to you as well. So I'm going to switch this back over to Kathy, and she's going to talk a little bit about financial planning, do it yourself.
All right, thanks, Seisha. That was great. And just as a reminder, we can take questions in the chat box as we go along. So if there's something that Seisha or I mentioned and you want to know more about it, or you have a question, please just go ahead and type it in there and we'll get those answered as we go through things here. So we're definitely open to questions. So as Seisha was saying, it's a balancing act when we're kind of trying to figure out, who's the best financial professional to work with. And there may be times or in situations where we say, actually, I think it's, maybe I want to explore doing it myself. And that's fine too. We're not saying that you need to hire somebody to do everything for you. And even when you do hire somebody, I would throw out there that you still have a responsibility to pay attention to what's happening and to ask questions so that you understand what's happening. And that way things just tend to go work better. So if you don't understand and you're working with somebody, ask them to tell it to you in a different way or to, restate it so that you can understand what's happening. But let's take a look at this. Let's say that you said, I don't have the money, or I'm interested in learning on this myself. Can you do it yourself? Yes. There are different ways, though, that you can improve the services that you provide to yourself. One, you could take advantage of all the great online tools that are out there. As probably many of you know, you can do your taxes online now, and the way the different programs are set up, it really does kind of help walk you through. And if you take the time to click the little question boxes and the help things, it really does teach you about it as you go through. There are robo-advisors out there now that are online where you can put in your information about yourself and your goals, and it'll come back and give you some information about what this robo-advisor suggests you do in terms of how to invest your money. But from what I have been able to read and research on this, there's still quite a bit of discussion about whether or not those asset allocations match up with what other people might have suggested doing. So you want to, do your homework. Use that as a tool. To me, at this point, robo-advisors are a tool like a calculator online, where I also need to have that background information and understand it well enough that I can then make a decision about whether this tool is working well for me or not. And we've put some articles in the chat that kind of talk about these robo-advisors and where they stand and things like that. There's also retirement calculators out there that can help you figure out how much you need to be saving, and where to get, given different variables that you put in. Again, it's a tool. It's not the whole answer, but it's sometimes a nice place to start. So one that we have put up there, I do believe, I'm just scrolling back here really quick. Maybe we'll put it in later, is best estimate, ballpark retirement estimator is what it's called. And that one lets you kind of play with, well, if I get a little bit more on my investment return, what would that look like in 20 years? Or if the inflation rate is higher or lower, how does that affect that? And you'll see that slight changes in those types of calculations can actually make quite a bit of difference. So you might want to play with that and understand how those variables do it. Either way, if you're doing it yourself, keep in mind that you might want to explore some of these free and low-cost services and keep increasing your own knowledge by reading and learning and paying attention to what's happening with your finances as you kind of move through your life. So let's kind of summarize here then a little bit about what we've been saying about choosing a financial professional and what it is you need to do. So on the next slide, we show, again, the steps to finding a financial professional. So what you're going to want to think about is, as we've said, what are the services you need, and then explore what financial professionals are in your area. There are a bunch of online directories that can help you find financial professionals in your area. You end up essentially all these different associations of different kinds of financial professionals have these directories, and when you go to them online, they ask you what your zip code is and how far you're willing to drive. Keep in mind that often we don't see financial professionals all that frequently during a year. You may only see them, 1 to 4 times. So maybe driving a little further isn't so bad. It's just something to keep in mind. And thank you, Brooke, she put all those directories up there in the chat. And then interview at least 3 people. Even if your friends or a family member says, well, this is the best person, they mean it's the best person for them. You need to talk to people and find out, is this a good person for me? Do I feel comfortable talking to them? Do they take me seriously? Do they answer my questions well? Is it a good match? It may not be a good match for you just because it's a good match for your Uncle Frank. So then the other thing that you do have a responsibility to do for yourself is to check their backgrounds and references. People should be willing to give you references. If they aren't willing, that's kind of interesting. You can also call the Illinois Securities Department if they are going to be helping you with your investments. Then you can find out by calling this 800 number whether or not there's been any complaints about them in Illinois. And as Sasha said earlier, you can also use the FINRA broker check to get more information about them, about their licensing. If you are concerned about avoiding investment fraud and having the person you work with not be somebody who's fraudulent, it's very important that you do these 2 steps. In not all cases, but in most cases, where somebody is really selling things and it turns out it's really fraudulent, they are not registered. They're not in the FINRA broker check. So this is an easy way for you to check on it. They need to be there if they are selling you investments. Okay, so that's kind of those steps. And then going to the next slide, once you've had a financial professional and you've been working with them, don't forget to stop every year or 2 and ask yourself, is the financial professional you're working with still meeting your needs? Maybe your needs have changed. Maybe they just don't, it's time to find somebody different. Maybe you can afford more now. So take a time to ask yourself that. And then also to ask yourself, is there a financial professional with expertise that now I need? When I started out my adult life, I did my own taxes for many years. And then there was a point at which it was really getting overwhelming for me that we just had too many different things going on in our household. And I realized, you know what? I need a financial professional with expertise in taxes to help me on this. And so I switched. So great, we have a question I see. This process can feel overwhelming. Yes, it can. What other advice do you have about initiating a relationship with a financial professional? Okay, I might need Sasha to jump in here too, but from my perspective is to remind yourself you're the customer and they want customers. And so even though they have expertise and seem super smart, they should be willing to work with you to build that relationship. And so that's why I really recommend making an appointment and going in and talking to them where you and they know that this is just a get to know you meeting. Often financial professionals won't charge for that. You need to ask before you make that assumption though. And that's why we really suggest that you do those at least three different people before you choose. Once you start working with somebody, I would again say that go into your meetings with questions. If you don't understand the answer or it seems very short and you thought it would have been a more involved answer, ask again. Ask them to explain it differently. And sort of build that relationship. You may have to put yourself out there a little bit to say, you know what, I don't understand how you got from A to B, and I want to know what you did to get from A to B in your calculations. That is a very reasonable question. You have the right to know that. If they suggest you do a certain thing, Say, okay, well, what are the pros and cons to doing this? Build that relationship, ask them to explain things so that you can understand it. Kamaya, is that what you're asking, or did I miss the point of the question? Or Seisha, do you have anything else? Okay, that helped. Okay, good. Good
I was just
question.
going to add, like, you can fire your financial professional and find a new one if they aren't working in your best abilities and knowledge, like for you. Like if they're not working for you, then you can fire them too.
Yes, and I think that's something that people find are always hesitant to do from my conversations with other people, but I think it's an important point. They work for us, right? And also, what I have heard happening to people that can be challenging is you start working with one person in a firm and they retire. And then of course, the firm will then pass you on to somebody else in that firm. Make sure that person's a good match for you. Just because, the first person was doesn't mean everybody in that firm is going to be a good match for you. And that if it's not, then you may either have to ask to see somebody else in that firm or start your interview process over and kind of look broadly. So don't make the assumption just because you got passed along that that's what is best for you. Okay, let me hand this back over to Seisha to kind of to share a few more resources and wrap this up for us. But also remember, questions in the chat box are great.
Thank you, Kathy. So one of the resources we wanted to kind of point you towards is that most of this webinar was used creating information from our University of Illinois Extension website called Choosing a Financial Professional. And then we do have a link to the resource. And this website was actually written by my colleagues, Karen Chan and Kathy Sweetler, who is on this webinar. So thanks, Kathy, for making some really great content. Next slide, please. So we definitely really want you to know that we have a financial literacy badges program. And this is a webinar as an earning badge eligible program through the Financial Literacy Badges program at the University of Illinois Student Money Management Center. University of Illinois students can earn digital badges through the Financial Literacy Badges program, which uses the Open Badges platform from Mozilla to award digital badges that can be displayed on multiple social media sites. Digital badges enhance your online portfolio by providing verifiable recognition for the activities you completed. So if you want to, we hope that everyone takes the quiz, but if you're looking to, enhance your digital learning of financial management pieces, this is a really great one. And then just so you know that the Financial Literacy Badges program is supported through a grant from Hire One. So great things. Hopefully you'll take the quiz, take it, and see. We want to see what you learned and what concepts maybe you didn't, but we also want to know, did you enjoy the webinar? So please take the quiz. We definitely want to stay in, if you want to move to the next slide, please. We want to stay in contact with you. So we've listed all of our social media and emails and addresses. So we partner, with not only University of Illinois Extension, but we partner with the Student Money Management Center on campus at all 3 locations, not only Urbana-Champaign, but Chicago and Springfield. We also partner with Columbia College and North Park University. So these are just 2 of our great partners that we want you guys to know about. Hopefully, moving forward to the next slide, hopefully everyone learned something new today. We want to thank you for coming in. We're going to stay on the webinar for just a few more minutes. So if you have any particular questions that are burning and that you want to ask, afterwards, or maybe you want to ask verbally, please feel free. But we have come to the end of our webinar, and hopefully learn more about choosing a financial professional, about fiduciaries, and all the things that involve financial professionals. Thank you, guys. Kathy, do you want to add anything?
I'm not thinking of anything right now, but if anybody has any questions, like Seisha said, we can stay on for a bit and answer those. We're happy to do that.
Well, if there are no questions, feel free to hop off if you need to go, heat up your lunch or whatever it is. But we are so glad you came on today and hopefully learned something new.